everybody. And this is session 6 of Talk the Walks, and today's session is role of law in modern day business. As standard, I'm not introducing the speakers, but I'm asking the question. Ayomi, is law to help people do business or to prevent wrongdoing?
I think it's to do business without wrongdoing. So it is more to do business, but also to comply and not be found fault with. So I would say both actually.
What is your opinion on that, Dulith?
I think it's to do business really. Without law, if you do business, people will steal from you. And without law, if you can't start a business because people can't trust each other and set up that whole structure. Especially if I talk about my startups, things I'm doing, I cannot even imagine of doing it without that a proper structure and the laws. And that's in fact, if I'm doing the same business in a country where the laws are not strong, I will have a much less success of getting people to be interested in investing and.
So, that leads to a second question to you, Dulith. What is the first thing you would have done, or any startup guy would have done, in terms of law when they kick off the business or kick off the operations? In terms of law.
Are you looking at it from
law point of view?
From a law point of view, from an entrepreneur's view.
Correct.
Right? I think what I look at typically is if there is a win-win situation for all the parties that are coming in, and if those win-win situations are secured by the term sheets and the documents that you get into. I'm talking typically about a startup.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Startup.
Yeah. So that's a simple answer.
Is that agreeable? What do you think? What's your opinion?
Okay, so this is a lawyer's point of view
Yes.
now. I think it's really important for any startup to understand what the different options are. Obviously, for a startup, you would want the greatest amount of flexibility with protection, and that's where the law could actually support you. The law could support you in starting out with some flexible and easy arrangement that allows you to do what you have in mind, and then allows you, as you grow more, you become more sophisticated, you need more protection, you can develop into something that is more complex, and the legal framework allows that, from say a sole proprietorship to a company at the end. So that graduation from doing business as you want it to doing business within a more complex structure is possible in law, and you should start your business with the intention of actually walking that path.
Right. Okay, that's a good introduction to the topic today. Let me now introduce the two people that my right and left hand side. So, the previous shows I promised that I'll bring some good entrepreneur with a challenging lawyer. And I have my right side, one of the Sri Lanka's, I would say serial entrepreneur, Dulith Herath, has started a number of businesses. Let him explain who he is. And on my left, I have the president partner of FJ&G Serum. She's one of the top lawyers in Sri Lanka. So please introduce yourself first. Who are you?
So
what's your background? Why did you interested in this kind of work?
I'm a typical entrepreneur, Sri Lankan entrepreneur. I started Kapruka about 12 years ago. That's a classic bootstrapped story. Up to today, zero funding and zero debt e-commerce company that bootstrapped from nothing up to today. And I've started Kapruka Global Shop and done Java Launch is one of my ventures, and then the latest one is actually Grasshoppers, and I'm working on another one called Fireflies. I may come to you soon. So it's nothing to do with insects. It's just the naming is very important for me. And starting from the word Kapruka all the way, spend a lot of time on the name because that's what actually you are building a brand at the end of the day. They're an ABC company. Right? So that's simply who I am, and I'm an entrepreneur.
And just to ask one question, what was your education background? What made you interested in this?
Interested in entrepreneurship?
Yes.
I didn't learn it at school. Okay. Right. So my education background, I have a master's in computer science. I have half a PhD. I didn't complete it.
Half.
Yeah, literally half. but I mean, there are two types of entrepreneurs, right? There's this educated entrepreneur and there are Ugat Vyavasayaka and the Nugat Vyavasayaka. They both work out sometimes, but you don't. So it's for the entrepreneur journey, I don't think it was a huge difference.
Okay.
The whole PhD thing.
Right. Now Ayomi, how about you?
So I think my story is also fairly typical. I went through school. I'm a daughter of a professional, so I knew that I'd like to do something professional. The only thing my parents inculcated in me is that I should work and that I should have some sort of academic basis that will help me work. There are 3 girls and a boy in the family, so it was you work, as a woman you must work, so that's a positive. But thereafter I finished my A-levels and didn't know what I wanted to do. I met a friend who was doing her law college entrance and she said, why don't you try this? So I did that and quite accidentally got into law. My grandfather's a lawyer, so I had a vague idea that law is something one could do. Passed out, again went into the Attorney General's department because again all expected, you just travel the expected path without thinking too much. Did my masters, again now wondering what to do. Met my mentor and predecessor and he said, why don't you join the firm? And he actually sold me the firm. I was an innocent law graduate. Asked him what can I do in the corporate law field. He, to be fair, gave me all the options. He said bank, company, back to AG's department, but you won't do corporate law for a long time. And the firm, and you do all of this corporate law work and you have your independence, you can say no to a client. So all of that appealed to me. Sold the firm, as I say. And I've been there for the last 20 plus years.
The part I liked most was the innocent lawyer.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. I won't challenge that with you. So, I think with the initial question, the start to the conversation, probably I should look at you because you have been serially startups in 3rd or 4th now. I think 4th.
6th actually.
Okay, 6th. So I missed 2. Dulith, is there a professional body for those entrepreneurs, startups to help in terms of getting legal advisors, getting the things in place?
We are just getting in there.
Okay.
So we have few things coming like Crowd Island and things like that. That gives you a little bit of guideline on how to get this, the whole startup ecosystem to work. It's really the startup thing is, you're a small guy. And here's this big elephant next to you with a lot of money, and so you're scared, right? You're a little rat looking at this guy, and you're quite scared about it. And the most of the time, the elephant really wants the little guy to also become big, honestly. But there's that fear, and
absolutely.
So there's this trust at the beginning. It's a very very tough walk towards the elephant, right? So that's where we really look at firms. We really try to. And we are sometimes scared, like we even think, can the firms be corrupt? I mean, can they influence the firm? Like all these things because we are just this little guy, right? So once you get rid of all that and later realize there is this trust with the firm, and that becomes your counsel, right? So every time you look at the elephant, you look at the firm and get that guidelines. And I mean, we have a typical example like. This is, I don't know whether you planned it this way, so I was a client, the Grasshoppers.
No, I never planned. Actually,
yes,
I got to know you were a client of them later on. So.
Right, so they were the firm for Grasshoppers. They were quite expensive for a startup.
So she said she's innocent, right? She said.
She
said,
the firm is not.
Yeah,
maybe.
she's not. Really.
No, it was hard to swallow for a startup, that kind of a bill at the beginning, but we invested that money, put it in there. That was like the last lifeline I had because we only put $200,000 from Kapruka for this and we were trying to raise $1 million. So we were down to the last bit and we put that in the firm and said, okay, give us the term sheet. So they helped us to walk that path.
Right. So that brings the question to you, Ayomi. Like, should the Sri Lankan law or the area that you're working in, should that be flexible? Not about the costing part. I'm not talking about costing, right? I'm talking about the legal system. Should it be flexible for startups? Should we do something different? Or is it happening actually? Is it something easy? Because, I mean, if you really look at, like Dulith said, someone comes near to a big elephant trying to get the things quickly, but if the law operates the same way like a big enterprise, it will be really hard. So what's your thoughts on this? Is it easy or is it difficult?
Well, I think firstly it's a mindset. As Dulith said, the startup must have the mindset that I must actually get the advice, I must be compliant, I must proceed with that benefit. So that's the mindset. Then if you have the mindset, there is enough information on the internet alone where any reasonably intelligent person can read up and get an understanding of what the legal framework applicable to them is. Then thirdly, I will speak for my firm, but I know other firms do this as well. We have, as a matter of policy, taken the decision some time back, about 5 years back, to give advice without charging a startup, to give them the introduction, to give them what the options are. You can do business as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a company. So we give that initial advice without charging. Not Kapruka, because they came to me at investment stage. So this is at startup stage, you know, where a young person has an idea but is now trying to decide how to put that idea into a business form.
Right.
So that we do pro bono, and I do know other firms do it as well, but certainly our firm does that. Once you get that initial advice, and also selecting a person, an advisor who can give you the advice is not too difficult. Unfortunately, there are lots of lawyers, and this initial advice is not difficult, it's pretty basic. So advise yourself and get the advice, it's not difficult to do.
Right.
I think the hardest of the 3 points I mentioned is the mindset. Because the tendency to think is, you know, I'm young, I really don't need to be compliant, I don't, the benefits from the legal framework is less than my benefits from actually functioning on my own. So I think the mindset is what's important.
Right.
And that's the message I would give out.
Right. At this point, I look at the audience, but I'm getting online questions here. Before I go to any online question, because that's keep the dialogue going. Anyone wants to raise a question from the audience, I can pick up. Otherwise, an online question coming.
How strong is IP law in Sri Lanka, and entrepreneurs like yourself be protected? For example, somebody copies your brand name. What do you do?
So we have had for some time now, and we have presently an Intellectual Property Act. It's based on the WIPO model, so it's current. The law is used and used effectively. So I would say your protection here is as good as anywhere else. And if somebody copies your brand name, you must register your brand name to begin with. So again, it's that mindset. So if you come up with a name, your instinct should be to protect it. And once you register it, the law does, the legal framework does afford you protection.
Fantastic opening for the another area of questions. So I'm looking at the online questions, and most coming to both of you are someone similar right now are patenting, which is also one of my questions. I'll straight away go to the patenting. So I'll be first looking at you. How does the patent law apply in Sri Lanka? Is there anything that in such, and what kind of framework is there for people to, you know, there being inventions and innovations to the kind of...
Okay. So the intellectual property law that I talked about covers trademarks, copyright, and it covers patents.
Okay.
So the legal framework is available to register a patent. Now, what is not always available is to register a patent, there is a process by which you have to actually describe your patent in extensive terms. And you sometimes don't get the technical specialists to do that. So that is a lacuna, given the fact that not a lot of patents are registered, I mean, compared to some other more active jurisdictions. But if patents are registered, that speciality will grow, but that speciality is available outside Sri Lanka. So again, it's not the legal framework that is not available. The legal framework is available, but to give effect to a full registration, sometimes the technical assistance isn't available. But if it's something IT related, this doesn't apply. I'm talking about something like, you know, chemistry,
right.
Medical, some other speciality to actually write out the patent is not available. In other jurisdictions, in law firms itself, you get the different technical expertise.
Right.
But our market hasn't grown to that yet.
Exactly the turning point to you. Now, how do you protect, because I know that she mentioned, called it out, IT, and you are mostly into that kind of solutions.
Yeah.
So, how do you protect your inventions or innovations?
I think, as Ayomi correctly said, this also has a piece of mindset into this. How serious are you about your idea and how much you want to really protect it? So I'll give you two examples. One is our Kapurka Global Shop. When I started, it's a price simulator, and it cost us about less than 200,000 rupees to find a resource here in Sri Lanka to write. It's a technical patent, to write the patent, and the lawyers' fees, all that, all inclusive, it cost us less than 200,000 to actually obtain the patent. It took us about a year and a half. So so that's if you do it in Sri Lanka for something like that. And then when it comes to this new idea I'm talking about, this fireflies thing, I feel it's a Silicon Valley idea. I feel nobody has done it. I've done all the research that I could do possibly on the internet, etc. I can't find it anywhere, anything even close to it. So I'm willing to put serious money into it, and it's going to cost about maybe $20,000-$30,000 to get a proper resource from, I mean a serious resource who can really protect this and get that patent.
Like a global patent?
Yeah, it'll be a US
patent. Yeah.
But so that's the price parity about, it's a mindset about how much you really want this for yourself. It's almost like doing a purchase, right? So you need to, so that, but your point is, to come to your point, it's available. I mean, so I've done it both ways. I've done it with a small budget and with a large budget.
Right. So I think I'm turning back to Ayomi because you talk about jurisdiction. What is the foundation for our jurisdiction? What system we follow most? What is the base for Sri Lankan law?
Okay. So actually, for a legal person, our legal background is quite interesting. Our common law is the Roman Dutch law, given our colonial background. But for business, what applies most is the English law, again given our colonial background. But the English law is a fairly sophisticated system for trade and commerce. So I think it has benefited this country to have that system here. And as you all know, the English law is applicable in many jurisdictions, and that again is helpful. Particularly when entering into business relationships with people from all over the world, the English law has been the commonality that gives investor confidence when they come into Sri Lanka. The fact that they recognize the legal system has given confidence, and it's a positive. And just to finish, even to date, there are areas of law where you actually refer to the English law, and that is built into our legal system.
I mean, this can be a question answered, but I'm asking for explicitly. So, is there a reason still we do not make it the part of that our version?
Okay, so the English law is the background.
Right.
But if you look at a statute that we all know, and that is the Companies Act, which governs the setup and operation of a company, many years ago, in 1938, we brought in our own Companies Act.
Okay.
And since then, we've had our own statute. So the basis and the background is English law,
right,
but we have built on that.
Right.
And that is so for many of our statutes.
Right.
So we have a basis that we started on, but to suit our own culture, our own commercial situation, the laws have actually changed. And law is that. It's something that changes with time.
Okay, so I'm challenging you now, but you'll have to, I know you being a what do you call client?
Client, yeah.
Should not prevent answering.
He's free to speak.
Yeah, free to speak. Do you think the law in Sri Lanka, the pace of change is at the same pace as the entrepreneurs and businesses have changed, the way we do business? Yes or no?
Probably
Does it help?
No, not at that pace that any entrepreneur would need. But if you ask this from any entrepreneur in any country, he will give this answer, because they are very fast driven and they want things to change the way they want things changed. So it will be a no answer in pretty much any country you ask that.
Yeah, so then I'll go to the next question. So if you really look at in the law system today, you're doing a lot of electronic payments and transactions.
Yeah.
I stop there. So a big question. So how does this reflect in terms of protecting you and the client who's doing business or the consumer who's doing the business with you, right? The laws are adequate
No.
because you do a lot of electronic.
I mean, we have this problem all the time. I mean, we have about 2 to 4% fraud all the time. I mean, I've 12 years in Kapruka, I have files and files of claims that we lost money and we just can't go after the people and get that because it was used a stolen credit card and it's sitting at CID for forever and they don't have enough resources to or the gaps in laws. So don't ask me specifics. I really don't know the legal part of it, where those gaps are.
Right.
But I just know that they are kind of in, this is undefined, this is a gray area, we can't really do that and this. You can't go to a police station, you need to always go to the CID if it is crime, and then this guy is in Anuradhapura, right? So then it just never gets followed up. So we write them off actually now.
Yeah.
So we kind of have a 2% or 3% always like a fraud that unrecoverable piece to it. Because we don't have a credit rating system, or we don't have a way of really black marking somebody, or so they always have a new life. I black mark the guy, he comes next day with a new hat.
Yeah.
Right? So
So I think I'm not trying to put you into any difficult, because this is not a question should go to government. I'm asking from a legal practitioner point of view. Is there any kind of a discussion going on changing the law to kind of help electronic transactions?
So again, to sort of add on to the earlier question, I think the laws by and large do change. It's perhaps not as fast as the EU, but the changes have come. So for electronic transactions, there is in fact the Electronic Transactions Law that has been here for some time now, and it protects electronic transactions. It recognizes entering into contracts by electronic form. It recognizes electronic signatures. It recognizes emails as evidence. So it sets the framework required for business and transactions in electronic form. So that is there. And generally I would say the laws do come. They don't come as fast as they should, as I said, but they do come. I think our weaker spot, and I'm sure you will all agree, is in the implementation. And the problem you faced in the time is really its implementation, and there are many reasons for that. Political, infrastructure, I mean, we all know what those are. So if we are looking for change, or we are looking at a message, I think it's that hackneyed message that implementation must be improved, and improvement would support business naturally.
Right. Right. So I have come to a junction where I have to turn that, but before I turn to a different set of questions, I would like to ask, there are some questions coming now, but audience, do you want to ask any questions? Please.
For example, if someone is like forming few companies with several partners, so what's the best option to go to? For example, if you go as an executive director in different company, if one company fails, for example, file for bankruptcy or whatever, you bankrupt. So if you are executive director, the other companies affects as well. Basically, they can't go bankrupt or something like that. Then something similar to Sri Lankan system. And one more question.
Okay, sure.
So also, like if you go as non-executive director, so if you don't have a controlling share of the company, so whatever the decisions they make, if you stay away in the meeting minutes, you can basically say based on that, if they vote for some issue, you can say I did not vote for it, right? So even if that's a non-executive director, as far as I don't know, I'm just starting. So the best option so far I came up with is just to get the shares. Say if I'm going for 15% stake, so I wait for the 15% share issue out of the company under my partner's name. In that case, as far as I got to know, I am not legally responsible if the company goes to bankruptcy or whatever, and it does not affect my other companies. Am I right?
Okay, first question and second question, and then I get to the third. Third, I need to talk to you a bit about. So if you're an executive director of a number of companies and one of the companies does badly is what you're saying, you're asking whether that would have an impact on, say, things like financing on the other companies, and the answer is yes, because a bank, and I have a banker here, a bank would look at the credibility of the directors and the associations of the directors. But what would be key is not really whether the director has been an executive director in another company, but the performance of the second entity. So whilst impact can be had on the fact that you were an executive director of one company that went bad, it's, in my view, not going to have a huge impact in relation to the business of the second company, because it's the entity, and the beauty of a company via sole proprietorship or partnership is that the company's role is distinct from the shareholders and the directors. Okay, that's the first question. Then on the second question, you're very right, and this applies to whether you're an executive director or non-executive director. When you're part of a board, if there are decisions made and you wish to not participate, it is very important for you to record your non-participation and the reasons that you didn't participate, because that is in fact a defense for you in anything that would happen in relation to the company. And this is something actually we advise our clients all the time, because it's not something that happens. Again, I think it's a mindset and it's our culture. If we don't agree, we don't like actually saying it. But it is actually quite important to express your views and record it. Then your third question, you need to reiterate for me, please. Or we can maybe talk about it outside after.
Consulting, that takes.
Sure.
Any other questions?
The advent of this blockchain technology, now the smart contracts are getting more fluid, right? So it is acting as a distributed legal authority to replace some of the legal and legislation intermediaries. So how credible this is in Sri Lankan context, how a Sri Lankan entrepreneur can trust on these smart contracts?
Well, as I said, in any, even blockchain or your distributed ledger, in anything, ultimately, from a legal point of view, it boils down to an arrangement between two parties, a contract between two parties. And electronic contracts now are recognized under the Electronic Transaction Act. So that act acts as a basis, though when the law came into being, it's very unlikely that all these new technologies were even seen. The basis is there, which is an arrangement between two parties, which is a contract.
So I think that part of that question to you, Dulith, now when you start these type of new businesses, are you taking into account using these bitcoins or any of these type of technologies, or are you how do you consider
It is actually. So this whole Fireflies thing is all about blockchain. So that the whole patent has blockchain in it. It's about creating colonies of workers who are on mobile phones that can contribute as a colony into the whole. And so from the time that a customer places the order and time that a plumber comes to your house and does the repair, this whole contract is a blockchain. And if something breaks down, we'll have to go to Ayomi with that blockchain token and say that, can you call this actually a contract? I'll find out then whether how far Sri Lankan law can, when you say electronic contract, I don't know really whether it's just email or electronic signature.
Yeah.
Latest is the token. So how far it can take us, we'll find out.
Right. So now that question and her answer and your answer brings another question to my mind. Now, we have found in many electronic transactions, I'm calling electronic rather than calling internet and all of that, right? We find we very often come across a statement, I'm agreeing to these terms and conditions of these, and maybe it's a maybe it's a agreement to pay subscriptions, or maybe buying something. You may have these kind of terms. So both of you, I think you can chime in however you want to. Does, from first the company point of view, can, like, if you have signed an agreement in old fashion, I call it old fashion, your document or anything, you have signed, you have read it, and you in front of that you have the document evidence. Anytime I can say, look, I didn't read it, I didn't see that, I didn't see the first page of that. How does that protect? So whoever want to chime in first, I would like both of you to answer this.
I will answer it from a service provider perspective. We have it because we have this feeling that one day if something goes wrong, this can come and help us. We never had to really practice a term sheet or a contractor like that online. And also some compliances like the PCI compliance on credit card processing mandates you to have some of these 35-page thing with an agree button, and just 99.9% people, including all of us, just agrees. Right? So it's a feel-good factor from a service provider. Right? So I think.
Okay, again, a very sort of legal question.
Yeah.
Early on, there's a whole plethora of case law on this. Early on, when you had a customer go into a laundry and give something to wash, you'd get a receipt that said what's been done on the top, and when you turn it around, there's very tiny print on a disclaimer of liability. So those were the early days, about 50 years ago. And there was at that point protection to the consumer. The fine print, if it's too fine, if you're not likely to read it, there was protection to the consumer. But we moved a very long way from that. And now terms and conditions that you're expected to read and just click a button to say you've read it before you accept a contract is the norm. So I would say that the terms and conditions do afford protection from a service provider and a seller point of view. And it will be very difficult for a consumer to rely on the fact that I didn't read it, it was too long, I couldn't figure out how to click and go into the terms and conditions. So I think the terms and conditions are important, and to be written out simply and clearly and fully is important, and it's equally important for the consumer to actually read the terms and conditions, because a defense that you didn't read it is not really going to afford you much protection.
Right. So let's say that between us there was a transaction and I emailed you. Forget about all these kind of terms and conditions and all of that. So between us we emailed and you processed something based on my email. And I reject. No, I don't want it, or I don't like that. Maybe money you borrow me or something. You find the legal advice. So does the caudal law takes that email as evidence to prove that I've agreed in Sri Lanka?
It does. And again, I'm back to the Electronic Transactions Act, where there is a presumption that the content in the email is correct. There's a presumption that your signature is genuine. So the email on the face of it is acceptable. And if somebody were to say, look, this is forgery, I didn't write this, they'd have to actually prove it.
Definitely, yeah.
So the law affords a presumption in favor of the electronic document.
Right. Right. I think if you want to take, I'm happy to take a question from the audience, but yeah, one.
Just continue with what so basically in that example, can someone say, okay, I didn't email, somebody hacked my email? If they say such
No, that is possible. So the presumption then has to be rebutted. It has to be proven, and I am in the company of techie people. It can be proven, and it has to be proven that the connection from the sender to the recipient isn't there. And I think that's the beauty of technology, that you can actually make the connection. But it has to be proven because of the presumption.
So I want to add something to that. Is the CERT, Sri Lanka CERT is the body of government who can do that kind of research for you. Like, I'll give you one quick example. Recently a competitor ad was coming up. When you type Kapruka, another Kapruka ad was coming up, right? And then that ad actually said Kapruka. So I took a screenshot of it, and I was going to take it to a lawyer and get this thing resolved, or even get protection. But then it's just my screenshot. I could have made it up in Photoshop, right? So I went to CERT, and they took the screenshot and they certified it and gave it, look, yeah, we observed it, it's true, and they did a little bit of IPs and all that attached document. I was very happy that Sri Lanka had a body like that to protect it. So your email can be traced through CERT.
Yeah, so emergency response team. So it comes under ICTA,
Right.
operating out of BMICH, if you're wondering where the CERT is.
I don't know if it is the emergency response. Is that maybe
CERT
that
is basically stands for that.
yeah, but
maybe
they
are doing
really
that service as well.
that ICTA's body of doing this kind of research for corporates, etc. And they'll charge you for this, and you'll gladly pay. It's just like $1,000 to do this, so it's available.
Is there any possibility to cheat or mislead during the
it happens all the time because it's not a face-to-face transaction. So that's what as I correctly earlier said, 5% of transactions go fraud.
So, how do you solve that problem?
Right now, we end up writing it off most of the time because it's just not worth the trouble unless it's a $10,000 kind of a transaction that we really go after. We just write it off.
So, Dulith, what do you do when you're free? What's your, I don't know whether you're free, but if you're free.
What are you trying to come to?
Just come to
I code actually. So
Code.
yes,
I heard that. Yeah.
Yes, it's something that I'm kind of addicted to from teenage days, and I still code, and it makes me feel like you can coach only when you can also play. So you kind of stay on top of it.
So when it comes to, I'm sure you're taking breaks and going to social media time to time. So how does something you've written in social media about Kapruk or someone writes, how as a business you have any protection or you have any defamation? I'm coming to that side now, right?
Right.
How do you cover that? Do you have any protection from the law, or do you?
I never had to really go that path.
Right.
But I've had people we do this news blog called lankanewspapers.com for 10 years. Once in a while I will get an email from some law firm, even from Sri Lanka, saying I want this article removed because this has fraudulent information about my client. So it's just a blog post. So we just comply and remove it. We don't want to go and protect it. So I know that for a fact, if I can spend the money, I can get content removed.
Okay.
And also the domain name registries takes a complaint. I can't remember the real term for this. You can formally submit a complaint. Imagine I say no, I'm not going to remove it. They can write, their lawyers can write to the domain name registry and say this page contains fraudulent, or not fraudulent, fake information of my client, and they will take the face value of it and remove it, take down my hosting. The site will go off until I prove and say no, this is
not guilty.
Not guilty. So I don't want to go through that. You just remove the page.
Remove that.
So it's possible to get content removed if you are seriously wanting it removed.
Yeah. So again, like if people like them have free time and you have a lot of cases, so my question is, if someone writes about, let's say, Kapruka in social media and he doesn't agree to that, he can ask to remove, but what kind of legal actions from law point of view a company has, not by the individual but the company?
Okay,
protection.
so the law of delict, which interestingly is Roman Dutch law and it's not English law, affords the protection required. If any harm is being caused to a person or there is potential harm to a person, there is an action in the law of delict, and you can ask a person to stop doing something. If they don't, you can actually go to court and assert your rights. So typically what happens is, as lawyers, we start with a cease and desist letter, which is the letter you would get asking to remove something. And if there is no action on the part of the person who is actually purportedly defaming, there is possible to institute action, and you get an interim order, and you go through a legal process. But that body of law is well tested, and it's something that we use all the time. But as he says, as Dulith says, as to whether you would subject yourself to a full-blown action or not is something each commercial person has to take a call on. And on defamation, generally, corporates are very sensitive. They don't want to go that path.
And also the problem of that is now, it's so the virality is so high. You remove it in one place, it's in 200 other copies.
Correct.
Right. So how far can you go with that?
We always advise our clients, if there's something bad said about you, just ignore it, because if
Right.
you actually go on trying to protect yourself, you highlight the matter more. So
Right.
and defamation, essentially, I just make this gain as a lawyer. Defamation is actually for individuals. So if an individual is being defamed, there is the protection available.
Protection.
Yeah.
That's a good news for the audience. So you know that most of the time you think that these things are, like blog in the media and all that cannot be, stopped, but you can ask. But I think there's another thing I want to turn it to an internal to the organization. Now, I know for a fact, organization like IBM, they have very strong social blogging rules and terms for employees. Now this is about employees writing about organization in other places, how good they are enjoying the organization, working for the organization, or maybe how bad experiences they have in the organization. So particularly for large or medium to large organizations, Ayomi, do you think it's essential to have social blogging in part of the terms of the agreement when employee joins, so that, or should it be case by case? The reason I'm asking is what kind of, because most of the time it's 1 out of the 100% does that kind of mistakes. This is employees doing.
Well, I think many corporates do have policies in place on how they want their employees to behave vis-a-vis the organization that they work in, and I think it's reasonable. The extent to which you would implement it or expect employees to behave really depends on the organization. Now at the law firm we don't have anything. We don't have a policy on what you can say about the firm or not, but we do advise many clients who have policies on employee behavior. So it depends very much on what you do, I think.
Right. How, I mean, I'm not asking your workforce, but mostly in the electronic type of web, internet type of business, how does, because people are very much accessible to that, and how do you prevent your side of the business, some of the secrets coming out?
Big part of that is the culture of your company, how you really inculcate the culture. I mean, you can put all these laws, but there are so many ways that these people can, get a friend to blog, or if you really want a message about your company being brought to the highlight, they will not go direct, they will get somebody else to create it and all that. So so it's about the culture really. I control the culture in a way and give the necessary freedom and make it sound like it's not a big deal to us really. That generally works as well. If you say like, look, don't do that, don't do this, they feel like they can do that and damage you as well. So we have a more of a relaxed piece. And the next part to that is that if we have a strong NDA that we sign for all employees at the point of confirmation, and that has, in our companies, I always have an uncompete in there. You cannot work for a competitor with, do any kind of dealings for a reasonable period of time, generally 1 year. You don't go more than that, then it's not defensible. So the NDA is the short answer.
I think what you're saying is make it simple and make it a part of the culture, so that people...
Make it simple, not so serious.
I think just to add, confidentiality and secrecy are also provisions that are very common in contracts, where confidential information of the organization can't be shared, and that's your NDA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you open up my next question series, but before I ask, I'd like to look at the audience and ask what kind of questions you have, because next I'm going to privacy side.
Yeah, in terms of, I think I'm not too sure that in terms of the idea, say for example, never disruptive or a totally new concept. It's not a service or a good, it's just a new management strategy, let's say. Can that be protected? Is there anything that the law says, you can't practice this idea elsewhere until we get something to that?
I had to ask you first about, does Wipro does that? Processes, does it let you?
That's what he's
Yes,
asking.
it does.
Wipro does.
So the processes can get protected. Then the idea can be written down, and then you'd have copyright. You can, if it's something, is it a design? If it's something like a design, again, it's protected.
It's a new management process.
Okay.
So what process is part?
Yes.
I'll give you a super simple example. iPhone slide to unlock is patented by Apple. Okay, that's the simplest patent I can explain to anybody. Nobody else in the world can do slide to unlock. So that's why you don't see it on Samsung.
That's the only feature that Samsung doesn't have.
They have slide. It's a Samsung.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I think
they have slide up to unlock.
Okay.
Right? So
looks like I want to get Android or iPhone kind of conversation one day. I'll probably keep you in mind.
so if they can protect such a simple idea, so why not?
Yeah. I think it's any other questions, because I'm trying to turn to the privacy side.
I can ask a question just on that. If you think about fairness, right? I mean, there's IP, then there's, if you take this 5 to unlock feature, it's so simple as you said.
actually there are tons of patents like that. When you look at it, it's like, oh, it's but then it's not. They came up with it first. So you have to be right. They have the right
And
to protect it.
it's the use actually.
Yeah.
Now, the slide to unlock it, I mean, it's something we can all think of, but that particular use to unlock your phone is what you protect.
And the process patenting is also allowed in Sri Lanka? Can do.
Yes.
All right.
So you can look up that patent. It's a beautiful patent. The slide to unlock. It will show the claims that they have made. I think they have 4 claims. So it's a nice case study.
So I'm introducing clients to you. So you have a client now already who can patent with you the process. So I think I'm now turning into the privacy side. Probably I should turn to you, Ayomi, first. In terms of privacy and protection of your data, how does this is implemented? Like you said, like there are enough laws, but it's implementation. Which stage of this in Sri Lanka? Is it fully covered, or there are some things that still grey?
Okay, so this is an area where there is no law actually. There we don't have data protection laws. So essentially, how you would protect your data is contractually. And now with GDPR, it's a hot topic. Everybody's talking GDPR now. With GDPR coming into being, there has been a need for local businesses who are actually doing business with the EU to bring in a level of protection that is equivalent or compliant with GDPR. And other than that, unfortunately, there's no law. And this is a question we get asked all the time. I think it will come in time, but it's a matter of priority as to what protections you put in place first from a government point of view. So as I said, contractually, or if you are doing business with EU parties, even law firms have required us to be EU compliant, and they want to know what we have put in place. Then for Kapruka, Kapruka is offering its services globally, including in the EU. Businesses such as Kapruka, I think it would be prudent if they are compliant. I know that in the US there are similar standards or higher standards being put in place. So I think it's a matter of time. We are already there where we have to meet some sort of global compliance standards. So though there is no local law, I think because of the changes elsewhere and because of the trade and commerce we do with the rest of the globe, we are compelled to be compliant. So not having a local law really does not give a business an excuse to use data freely. The other thing is, I think from a reputational point of view, it would be uncool if you were to abuse the privacy of another party. And I think you had mentioned, Anura, that we all get calls where our telephone numbers and my attorney at law address has gone elsewhere, and you get mail and calls. I think that's going to stop soon.
So here's the challenge. So you picked up that question, which I'm going to ask you. So honestly, Dulith, now you believe in data protection, do you?
Yeah, I do.
So does your firm call finding numbers from other people to sell, and how do you see that?
No, that's she correctly said it. I mean, I'm shooting myself in the foot actually. If I just keep flooding people with the brand name involved, solicit services, it can do brand damage. So we are careful about it, but we see a lot of other people abusing it. I mean, even big brands.
Yeah.
You are on some list,
correct,
and then the list get copied over. So now you have to change your email address, and actually, that's one of the main gaps that I'm seeing. We really need some laws in Sri Lanka that can protect email spamming, SMS spamming, all that. You can't do that in most developed countries. Correct. Here, you can freely do that. It's very annoying.
Yeah, so I mean, all my questions, if you looked at, I did not use the trade and commerce, I use electronic transactions because I want to cover vast things. That's the thing. But I think it's a very good answer, Dulith, coming from you, like, from an entrepreneur, businessman.
It's very short-sighted marketing that these people use. So
right. I think there is one question due to the time. I will ask that then open that I need to ask. Now, this is something I think most of us here, probably you, 3 of us, and in the audience, if you are deal with most of the foreign investors, coming and saying this statement. Many of the laws in Sri Lanka does not support us scale up, scale down, or firing people, if you use the right wording, but legal term is scale or maybe flexibility in growing or shrinking. So I'm spinning my head and look at, because you also involved with investors. So do you have that problem? Maybe I'll ask you. Do you have that problem? Investors.
No, I haven't done hundreds of these deals. I've only done 2. So the guys that I've dealt with, they haven't really had a problem. They're from this region, so
Okay.
they know this. But I personally feel that we are at a disadvantage. Corporates are at a disadvantage, where we don't have enough flexibility to challenge our employees. Right? They feel like they have multiple lifelines in a company.
Yes, correct. And so I have, that's a very good answer, but I have a question to you on that, on related to performance, but turning to you.
So I think scale up, scale down, if it's a scale down is easier to do. Okay, firstly, we don't have laws that allow you to fire a person. We have labor laws that come from a welfare state protecting the employee, which are archaic, which are very difficult to change, and again, all of you know the reasons why. So we have to work within what we have. We do get questions all the time from investors, particularly investors going into manufacturing or sort of large labor type activities. If you're looking at scaling down is generally possible if it is you want to change your business model, you want to close down one part, it is possible to do within the legal framework. What is difficult is your multiple lifeline employee not working very well. Behavior falls short of misconduct, because misconduct is the only basis on which you can terminate an employee or you reach agreement. So that is an issue. Yes.
So non-performance. If I have, forget about scaling down, but I have a non-performer in the company and I want to get rid of that and bring a performer.
Yes, so if your non-performance borders on misconduct and you can build it into misconduct, you can terminate the person. I'm not advising any of you to do that, and I have HR specialists in the audience I'm not looking at. But non-performance is something that has to be handled on a one-to-one dialogue, because you can't terminate the person, and you do everything you can to encourage the person to perform, to change the work, to get work more suited. You do everything you can, and then you have to enter into dialogue if that fails. You can terminate the person with consent, as you know, consent is encouraged. You offer another job elsewhere, or you give a termination package that is attractive. So no, our laws are archaic in the labor area, in this area, and it is a problem.
So I have another tricky question now. You said that we follow Dutch Roman, and then you said English. So which law covers, which law has at least some connection to the labor law part of that?
So all our labor laws are built in statute. We have about 7 to 10 statutes that deal with the different areas, actually deals with all areas dealing with labor. So our labor law is statutory. So it's homegrown basically.
Right. So maybe my last question, because it's the time factor, Dulith. Now, in terms of you as an entrepreneur and a businessman existing, having some scale of business in Sri Lanka, how do you manage, how do you deal with, or advice to the audience, dealing with knowing the I won't call it loophole, but the limitations in the law, dealing with the performance, not the organization, but the individuals?
I think we try to come to agreements as much as possible, and non-performance has been our biggest issue, where we really can't. It's two-sided thing, right? I can abuse the if non-performance was a valid reason to fire somebody, a company could abuse it as well. I can tell anybody, you are not performing. There can be other reasons. So there is two sides to this coin. Again, coming back, I think we try to inculcate the culture of the company overall and create teams that work for that culture and not these laws.
Yeah, I would agree, because ultimately you're dealing with people,
right?
And I deal with professionals, a big team of professionals, and they are all individuals, and it really is enhancement of your management skills. the fact that we don't have the hire and fire law is right, but perhaps because we don't have it, our management skills, people management skills are better than other jurisdictions.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to see myself in a culture where I walk into my office one morning and I am told to pack my box and walk out.
Yep.
That is a very difficult culture to work in, and you'd almost be watching your back all the time, I would think.
Yep.
So I mean, maybe our people management skills are better than jurisdictions, and I look to Ravi because that's what he does, are better than in jurisdictions where it is in fact a hire and fire, because that can bring with it different cultural and work connotations. I don't know, it's a thought.
Right. So last question from the audience, if there's anything, but otherwise I'll ask them to summarize. Is there any questions?
Can I ask one? On the slightly scary side of the law, I couldn't get that notice to you. We have so many entrepreneurs now coming in. Dulith, I'm a great admirer of your work. So people are coming up with new ideas and want to change. And as they come up with these ideas, how do they know whether somebody else has already patented it or has implemented that idea, or because a swipe on the iPhone, for example? Is there a way to figure it out? I don't know if the
Okay, so locally, and that's why I guess Kapruka would go to the US. The first thing you must do is to seek to protect your IP, because when you seek to protect it, you will get to know whether it is a innovative, a new idea or not. Now, you can seek to protect it in Sri Lanka, or you can do it outside Sri Lanka, and going to the US on something that is IT based perhaps is one of the strategies you'd adopt. If you're going to spend a lot of money, you'd ensure that you can protect it because it's a new idea. So that would be my answer.
And there is quite a bit of lookup tools online that, like for example, I can type in a layman's term saying how to unlock phone, and that patent will come up. Right. So I've been spending quite a bit of time on this Fireflies idea, trying to find this exact thing I wanted to find, if it exists somewhere else, without paying some researcher to to do this for me. And there was enough online tools to get you pretty close. And I found obvious ones, like, oh, it's been done. It's been patented in 75 by some guy, right? So,
Sister, out of my curiosity, I hope we are talking 3 or 4 times about this thing, Firefly, and have you patented it already?
no, about to.
Okay.
But we are just finishing up the claims.
Right. Right, I think that winds up the session today. I think there are 3 or 4 messages coming out, so please do correct to great leaders side by side who are brought here because they are extraordinary performance in the Sri Lankan economy and as well as in the whole system of operation. One, bringing wealth of knowledge, serial entrepreneurship, bringing economic strength. Dulith, thank you for that. And left hand side, someone who's helping those kind of entrepreneurs, preventing all wrongdoings and making sure our economy and the business and the country grows. So the summary I have here is that, firstly, please do not assume anything. There are laws to protect, and if you have problem, free of charge for a while, but then invoice comes. Secondly, yes, of course, patenting available. The process is simple, but if you're really looking at your ideas, innovations, you'll have to go for a broader, bigger kind of context. There are areas that our law is not covered, example, labor, certain areas on labor side, but I think they are right now being addressed or being seen, but I think it's a question of culture versus mix of law versus, should everything be executed by law? Should everything be executed by culture? I think we have to come to a middle path that we as leaders, true leaders, their opinion is that we should more encourage people to have the better culture. And finally, I think the problem of question of whether these exist or not exist in our mind is because the systems are there but implementation has been slowed for various reasons which we don't want to address in this forum. Did I miss anything? As a summary, or please add anything that you want to add to the message. I think I'd like to add you a simple message to the audience. Or the viewers.
I think you summed it up pretty well. For me also, the culture piece is a very something that's very hard for somebody to understand without experience. So that's what I'm giving you with these 12 years of this kind of entrepreneurship, etc. The culture is a very important piece. Law is on the side, but I kind of keep it few centimeters behind the culture and the culture at the front.
Yes. No, I would agree with everything that's been said.
Right, thank you. So I have a challenge. I have a token of appreciation. First goes to Dulith, you.
Oh.
I don't know how I picked up. Thank you so much. All the very best
Thank
in
you,
all your
guys.
endeavors. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Ayomi, I actually have the right one. So thank you so much and all the best. And thank you so much for helping the.
Pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you for the invitation.
Thanks.